Today I'm going to talk about my 5 most favorite baits to utilize for springtime walleyes on the tributaries of Green Bay. For today's purpose, these rivers are going to include the Menominee River, the Peshtigo River, the Oconto River, and the Fox River in Depere, and then I'm going to put the Bay of Green Bay as well, because there's times you get a heavy rainstorm, the rivers get all chocolatey or muddied up, and the Bay of Green Bay is a place to go, especially post-spawn. The Bay of Green Bay can be very, very hot if you catch that post-spawn just right. These baits are subjective, meaning they're my favorite. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be your favorite, but I think if they work for me, they should work for you. So let's go over that first bait right now. The first lure is what I think is an underdog lure, just because I don't ever hardly see it being utilized. But that lure is the Jigging Wrap. This is the black and gold version right here, and it's one of my most favorite lures to utilize, especially when you have to be in that vertical jig. And vertical jigging is essentially when you are using either spot lock on your boat or you're slipping the current and you have to remain vertical. And the thing I like about the Jigging Wrap, even say over, let's say like a shiver minnow here, made by Moonshine Lures, and this is a great lure as well, that little bit more narrow profile on the Jigging Wrap cuts that water much better, and it just allows you to stay more vertical. The other thing too is when I ice fish the Fox River in Depere, and it's very interesting when you drill your holes and you put in your depth finder transducer from the Vexlar, you'll be surprised on how that current can bring a jig 2-3 feet away from where you are over the top. And what I found out just from ice fishing is that that narrower profile, it just allows it to remain more vertical and not get that sweep or at that angle when you're trying to be vertical. There's something about being as vertical as possible. And when I am fishing finicky walleyes, I like utilizing a Jigging Wrap and then create that reaction bite and then just pound that sand or just pound that bottom. And sometimes you just let it lay for a little bit, sometimes 5 to 10 seconds, and then you give it that pop, and that create that reaction bite and get you on some really good walleyes. The Jigging Wrap is one of my favorite baits when the fish want that vertical presentation. Next up on the list is the hair jig. Now, when it comes to the hair jigs, I like a hair jig that has low profile hair, meaning it doesn't bush out or fan out. I like it to be more of a skinnier, low profile, kind of like a minnow or an emerald shiner has that skinnier profile. And then a lot of times I will cut hair off of my jigs, especially if it gets too long. So this is one that I've trimmed down already, and I'll cut it on an angle, so it kind of creates that feathered look to it. And then if you look at it, it kind of creates that almost like a belly, almost like a minnow belly, and then how a minnow would come up and then narrow up at the top. And the other thing I like about some particular hair jigs is having, once again, that narrow jig head, and that's what this one has. I like that a little bit more than the round style because I don't need as much weight then to bring that hair jig down to the bottom. So here's an example of a brand new jig I haven't touched yet, but the tail is actually quite long. Probably cut maybe about 1 inch to 1.5 inches off, and then I'll angle that down a little bit. As far as the profile of the hair, I think that's perfect. It's not too bushy, a little bit more narrow, but once again, it's got that little bit wider head. I do like that narrow style jig head. Now, when it comes to fishing these hair jigs, I fish them maybe just a little bit differently. I will utilize the vertical technique where you go straight down below the boat and bring them up and pop them up. But my favorite way to fish hair jigs is essentially to cast them out, and then I like to drag them along the bottom, creating a really slow drag. And it'll be a constant drag, and then pop, or drag, pop, pop. I know a lot of people like to jig them, pop them up in the air. There's times where that works great, and sometimes there's times where it actually works even better. But I've had very good success when I just create a slow drag as it's going along the bottom, and then sometimes even create a little bit of a stop for maybe 3 to 5 seconds, and then create that pop pop. So one of my favorite combos, especially for fishing the Peshtigo River, is using a dragon jig made by Bee Fishing, and it's a weedless jig. and then utilizing B Fishing's ringworms and the firecracker color or the firecracker purple. Both work very, very well. And if I had to pick one combo color, it would be these with the chartreuse jig, and then the firecracker color with the chartreuse tail. All right, folks, so this guy here is my go-to Peshtigo river bait. And the reason being is that the Peshtigo River has a lot of snags in them. And this little barb on here, if you can see that, that really helps keep them out of the snags. Now, they'll still get into snags, and I'll still lose these particular jig heads, but nowhere nearly as much if I utilize just a good old-fashioned regular jig head. And then that sparkle color with that little green tail. How to fish these particular baits. So what I like to do is set up of a hole, or in a lot of cases, especially the Peshtigo, and in cases some parts upriver in the Menominee, there are these little depressions. And I wouldn't really call them a hole. All they are is maybe, 4 feet by 4 feet, and they're just where there's a little bit of a dip in the sand. And what that creates is it creates an area for wood usually to get downriver, and then it gets caught in there and it'll lay down in there, and that's a lot of times where the snags are as well. But these walleyes really like that because they can get out of that current just a little bit more, and then they have that wood to sit by and ambush prey as it comes by. So what I do is I mark these ahead of time. I've been fishing for quite a few years. I know where these little spots are. I like to anchor upriver from these particular spots, and then I will cast these past the hole, bring them back, and a lot of times I can feel that dip where this is coming across. I can feel it kind of going down, and a lot of times I'll feel it actually on the way up when I let the rod go back, and I can feel the jig actually climb back up. When I feel that, I know that I am in that depression, and I will literally just sit there and pump and work this within that hole. And these walleyes, they'll come through these holes all day long. So I'll just sit there and keep working it, and boom, you catch a walleye. And usually what happens is when you first find them, you'll catch 2 or 3 walleyes into one of those little depressions, pull them out of there, and they're no longer in there. You could move around, but a lot of times I'll just stay in one spot. And sure enough, 20 minutes, half hour later, here comes another wolf pack of walleyes, 4 or 5 of them, or whatever it might be, and then you can hit them as well. But a lot of times I just let it sit in the hole, and I just pick it up and drop it, pick it up and drop it. And that's how I fish the B Fishing jig head with the 4-inch ringworm tail. Now, if you fish spring walleyes enough, you know that the rip and wrap is kind of a staple of tributaries of the Great Lakes for spring walleyes. I happen to like a bait my buddy makes. I'll link his information down below, but this is a silent rip bait, as he calls it. Does not have any rattles in it. It does have a heavier feel to it. I'm assuming that there's maybe lead built into it, and then he custom paints these, and I can get really any color from him. Well, because he's my taxidermist and he's my buddy, I just tell him, hey Jim, I want this particular color, and he makes it up for me. But this particular bait has done very well. We've experimented with different styles of baits, different sizes of baits. Once again, these kind of baits, if you can tell, they're more deeper. This has that narrow profile, similar to, like I said, the bucktail jigs, that I like that more narrow profile, or the jigging wraps. And this bait has been our go-to bait. There's 2 colors that have done very well for us. This is what I believe he calls the purple crown. I'm not sure, but I believe this is what he calls the purple crown. It's purple with chartreuse on the bottom. And then he has another color called Mr. Yuck. If you remember the old Mr. Yuck commercials when you were a kid years ago, it's mimicked after that, but it has this unique antifreeze chartreuse color, if you want to call it that, with a little black up top. These 2 particular colors right here have been outstanding for us. You can reach Jim at Old Erie's Taxidermy on Instagram. Just look him up. Tell him Clint from Oak and Iron Outdoors sent you, and he can hook you up with these particular colors or whatever colors you would like, and they're called a silent rip bait. Now, one of the nice things about having a buddy who does custom painting, I can have him come up any color I like. And this is one color I'm going to try this year. He just painted this up for me. It's essentially white in the middle with chartreuse ends. Last year, white and chartreuse seemed to be a very hot color for a couple of weeks on the Bay of Green Bay, and then in the Oconto and Menominee rivers. But this particular bait, I'm going to give this a try. So if you folks don't mind, hit that subscribe button, and you can see how this bait works for me, or at least a new color, we'll say, for springtime walleyes. Now, if you fish springtime walleyes, you know you got to have that favorite nighttime bait that you like to throw in shallow waters where those big females can reside. And, you know, for many years, this was my go-to bait, and it actually still is the Husky Jerk, Rapala Husky Jerk in the clown color with that chrome belly and then that chartreuse top. Now, in the last couple of years, I've been utilizing this particular bait, which is the Scatter Wrap Deep Husky Jerk number 10. And the difference between the two is essentially that plastic bill. And the plastic bill here creates much more erratic action, and it really kicks this lure out to the side. Now, there are times when you want it to be a little bit slower. Maybe the fish are a little bit more lethargic. And I found out with the Husky Jerk, what I like to do when those fish are a little bit more lethargic is just to create a long pull and stop. Long, slow pull, I should say, and then stop, and not really pound these too hard. And there's times where snapping these real hard is the trick as well. A lot of times you just have to find out what the fish want. Now, when the fish are a little more on fire and you're looking for that erratic component just to get them to go, that's where this guy comes in. And then it might move a little bit because of that lip, but I like to do a steady pull and then boom, give it that crack, and then it really throws it off to the side. And then being suspending, it just stays in that zone a little bit longer. If you found this information helpful or even entertaining, please hit the subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. Now, springtime's upon us. I'm going to be hitting those waters. I'll be filming my adventures out there. The other thing is, I'm always grateful to talk to people who are fans of the Open Air and Outdoors channel. So if you do so, come on by and say hi, and I may even have a bait from O'Leary's Taxidermy to give away. Like I said, I always enjoy talking to fans of the channel and who watch the channel. So I'm always grateful for that. Just so you know, this is a channel that encompasses the entire outdoors, including hunting, fishing, and fitness. And you might see some scouting videos of bow hunting coming up, or you may even see some fitness videos coming up here shortly. But just so you know, if you only want to stick to the fishing videos, I have playlists of fitness, bow hunting, fishing. You can just go right to the fishing playlist and only watch the fishing if you choose to do so. That way you don't have to watch the other stuff if you're not a fan of that. But if you are, you can check out those other videos as well. All right, folks, until next time, Clint from Open Air and Outdoors.